97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
We expect to win every time we step on the field. That's just the mindset that we have.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4. Geoff Mosher, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. He's in the house today. The NFL, they have to be watching these numbers. A couple Tampa Bay Buccaneers came down with coronavirus. They had to be quarantined. By the way, speaking of the NFL, we go to a college game. Clemson had over 20 players. LSU, a bunch of players. And now Rutgers has a couple of players that are going to be quarantined as well. We'll have to keep our eye on that. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, InsideTheBirds.com. We will bring him in now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as we got a lot to dive into today. Mosh, what's up, pal?
What's up, fellas? Hope you had a great weekend.
Happy Father's Day to you, by the way. Belated, I guess, a day.
Thank you. I had a great one. Appreciate it.
That is nice to hear. All right, so let's start with a couple of things here from late last week that kind of went through the weekend and get your take on how this could affect stuff. Because obviously, when that news came down about Phillies players, it hits home a little closer when it's players that you are more familiar with. And then it was, Tampa Bay Lightning, and then it was a couple of college teams, and now you're hearing Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So how do you think this affects the NFL's mindset moving forward?
Well, I think the NFL has to be, I don't think they're going to be deterred from their plans. I think they feel like they've got a protocol laid out that can work, but I don't think anybody in the NFL can tell you with 100% confidence that it is going to work, and that with all the testing and with all the early report procedures that they have, that there's not going to be a rash of COVID tests that are positive, and that it's not going to interfere with the day-to-day operations for NFL teams. So we'll have to see. You look at a lot of the NFL teams have their headquarters. I mean, there's 2 teams in Texas. There's 3 in Florida. I mean, there's teams there's a team in Arizona. So there's a lot of teams that play and practice in states where you're seeing a huge spike in COVID tests. And so even with all of the protocol that is laid out, everybody still has to get to the facilities from somewhere else, and they have to travel, and they have to be around people. And are they taking all the precautions? All it takes is 1 or 2 people to really make, spread and make an outbreak. So we'll get our answer, I think, pretty early, maybe a week or 2 before the start of training camp, because teams are going to mandate that players arrive early to get their testing in and quarantine if necessary. And we'll see if they really can pull this off.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder.
Certainly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, certainly some of the things that we're reading about now with the college football teams and the baseball teams don't inspire a lot of confidence. But on the other hand, and I should say NFL teams, because obviously we've seen it with the Texans, the Cowboys, and the Buccaneers, but if you see a lot of players between now and the start of camp testing positive, maybe the NFL will look at that as saying they're getting it out of the way and over with, although I don't know if there's enough medical evidence now to suggest that if you do get it, that you're done with it altogether and you don't have to worry about getting it again. Just a lot of things left to be cleared up.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff late last week about, the Hall of Fame game, and that there's coaches that are speaking off the record. And I think Ed Werder reported that there's a number of coaches who now, are starting to feel like they don't see the season starting on time. And then that all coupled with what happened over the weekend, it just feels like football has kind of sidestepped everything, but you wonder how much longer they could do it for.
Yeah, well, they got about a month, right? Maybe even less.
Right. When does it start to get serious? When does it start to get serious where they might have to start reconsidering Plan B?
That's a good question. Right now it's June 22nd, so for a lot of teams, training camp will start day 1 in about a month or about 5 weeks. But again, players will be coming in earlier, a week, maybe 2 weeks in advance, I've been hearing, to get their testing, to get quarantined if necessary. to adhere to all the precautions. If you see a rampant amount of positive tests once teams start reporting, and that's going to knock guys out of camp for a week or two, the NFL will still probably try to go on with the players who are healthy because the rosters are so big. But then you have to see what kind of domino effect happens as camp goes along. If we're, say, in the middle of August and you have a bunch of NFL teams that have been missing a sizable chunk of their roster because of COVID or just because of quarantining, and these coaches are really not able to instill their game plans, both offensively and defensively and special teams, to their teams because they just haven't had the consistent number of healthy guys, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I was just thinking, is it possible that we might not actually have football at all? Are they going to look at what college football does and then maybe try and base their decision off of how it goes for college football? I mean, I can't imagine the NFL not finding a way, whether it's right or wrong. I just think with the power of the National Football League, they will find some sort of way to get their product on the field, whether it's with eighth stringers because people are going down testing positive, or maybe it works out perfectly for them where not that many people do get it. But I can't imagine no NFL at all. Can you?
Well, I can imagine it, Hunter, and only under the circumstance. Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think the NFL, under almost every circumstance, wants to be able to get its product going. But, take a look at baseball and, the idea that they might not – you have owners, right, who don't want to play because they think they're going to lose money. Now, NFL may not have to worry about that per se as much as under your scenario, where if you have a lot of players who have tested positive and who haven't practiced and who've been out, and you have to have Sunday night and Monday night and Thursday night games – featuring, third-string quarterbacks and 3/5 on the offensive line that are backups and, really ugly football, I'm not sure that the league is going to think that that's the best thing for the season because they're paying everybody's salary, right? So everybody's going to have to pay all the owners are going to have to pay the same salaries, and then they're going to wind up potentially seeing games played by second and third stringers, theoretically. Then they may have to worry about ratings, and then they have to worry about the cap going down and things like that. I mean, I think it would take a lot for NFL owners to say it's not worth having a season, but I can't just completely rule it out. I think we'd have to actually see how much of an impact COVID had on the season before we even make that decision.
We often hear, Geoff Mosher with us, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. We often hear that the most powerful people in sports aren't the leagues or the teams or the owners, but it's the television networks here. And you wonder how much pressure would the NFL have, to put some sort of product out on the field?
You mean from a TV standpoint?
Yes, like the, if the NBA is playing, okay? Now, the NBA is, in my opinion, they're in a much better and different situation than these other sports. They have a bubble that seems to make sense that you can keep people there. I don't know that a bubble situation works for the NFL.
Yeah, I don't think a bubble situation could work for the NFL, given how big the teams are with their coaching staffs and their players and their medical staffs and all the people that are involved. And I'm not 100% sure that the NBA's bubble system is going to work out. I mean, we're far from that being considered a success because it hasn't even started yet. So we have to see how that works out before we can even say that.
I'm just saying, I agree. I'm just saying, in my opinion, they have a much better chance because of how small their rosters are and that you can house everybody there. They have 3 arenas. You can play 3 games in each arena each day. It just seems that it's a much better, more conducive setup than, say, hey, I don't even know how football would play in a bubble situation. I mean, what place has multiple football fields where you can house 32 teams and play football games there all day on a Sunday?
I don't know, and I know it's really interesting. I would love to know what the NFL is, the owners themselves think about it from a financial standpoint. Because again, if you have a season, that means you're paying your players, and if you're paying your players, you're paying it on that cash and liquid that you put out that you think that the players are worth and what your franchise is worth. And if you're worried about this year and maybe even next year, who knows, and taking a hit, you might be worried about even putting out that money this year if the cap goes down. So, I mean, to me, it's not it's not coincidental that a lot of first-round picks have not yet signed, right? There's got to be something that involved with that, with money and the seeing the team's medical staffs. And also, I'm sure Jamal Adams has come up in your guys' conversation. He wants money, he wants to be out of the Jets, he wants his extension. Normally, year 3 is when a lot of these guys would see extensions. But if you look at Jamal Adams, that 2017 draft class was tremendous. I mean, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, you're talking about Deshaun Watson, you're talking about Alvin Kamara, you're talking about George Kittle, you're talking about Budda Baker, TJ Watt, Marshawn Lattimore. These guys have all made at least one, in some cases 2 Pro Bowls. Kamara has made 3, and he doesn't have an extension yet either. Dalvin Cook wants his extension. Juju Smith-Schuster. Only what? I think McCaffrey and the safety from the Bears, right? Eddie Jackson, I think he signed an extension. That's only 2 guys who are available for extension from that class that have signed it. There has to be something behind the owners not wanting to sign these guys right now and commit all that upfront money, because they might be fearing losses financially from this upcoming season. So that ties into what we're talking about. There certainly is fear. There has to be fear in the minds of the owners that there is going to either be a fanless or a season or no season, and that's going to impact the revenue big time.
Geoff Mosher, Football 4, powered by Inside the Birds. You brought up Adams. Let's go down that road. The Jets believe, or according to reports, people believe the Jets will stand pat and let this play out in regards to Adams. Now, he comes out and says there's 7 teams or 8 teams. I don't know, was it 7 or 8? The Eagles were one of those teams. They typically always are. How realistic are the Eagles as a suitor for Jamal Adams, if at all?
Well, I think it's unrealistic, and a lot of people are saying it's because of the money, and certainly that's a part of it. But I think that there's the bigger reason that it's unrealistic is because as you just mentioned with the Jets, I don't see why the Jets would feel the need to trade him for anything less than something absurd like 2 first-round draft picks. And he's really good. I like him a lot. I'm not sure he's worth 2 first-round picks, though. But if you're the Jets, you look at Jamal Adams and you say, you know what? He's one of the best at his position, and we have him under control for this year, his 4th year. We have him under control for the 5th year because of the 5th-year option. And theoretically, we could control him for 2 more years with the franchise tag if we really wanted to do that. I doubt they do, but nonetheless, they have him under control for at least 2 and possibly 4 years. And as much of a stink that Jamal Adams wants to create publicly through social media, through a list of teams he would probably be traded for, there's not much he can do to force the Jets to trade him. I mean, he's not in a situation like Le'Veon Bell where he's made a lot of money and it will sit out like Le'Veon Bell did for a year and then become a free agent, because again, Le'Veon Bell was able to go to a different team. The Jets still control him for 2 years. So I don't see why the Jets would be forced to move him. They were 6-2 in their last 8 games last year. They were 7-6 in games that Sam Darnold started. I think we saw up close, even though that the Eagles routed the Jets, that was a little bit closer than the final score appeared. Obviously, Luke Falk started, but the Eagles had trouble moving the ball consistently against that defense, and Adams was a big reason why, and Greg Williams is a good defensive coordinator. So the Jets are going to deal with the public blow right now, but they're thinking that they got a chance to compete in a division next year that's not going to have Tom Brady, and the Bills will be the favorites, but that's just a paper title. And why would they be forced to move him just because he's making a big public stink? It doesn't matter. They don't have to move him. They can deal with the bad PR. And it's very possible that next year, if they get off to a good start, if there is NFL football and the owner's a little bit more, or a little less afraid about spending and committing big money, that they'll offer Adams what he wants, and Adams will feel more comfortable with the situation. So I think that's the biggest reason why you won't see Adams traded. But I will say this, Adams could be signed by the Eagles a little bit easier, I think, because of that 2 years than, say, like an Ngakoue or a Jadeveon Clowney who's a free agent. Because this year alone, Adams is not going to make a whole lot of money. I think he's making less than $1 million in salary.
Yeah, it's like $750.
So if the Eagles could acquire him, right, and give him a new deal, maybe it comes with like $35 to $45 million guaranteed, and they could take a good chunk of that guaranteed money and put it into this year's cap. right? They could say, hey, we're going to put like, that's a bookkeeping thing. He still gets the same money, but they're $20 million under the cap this year. They could use that cap space to eat up a big chunk of that. And then you have less guaranteed money next year, the year after, the year after. So that keeps his base number low, his salary cap number low, which is exactly what the Eagles need as they go forward because of their cap troubles after this year.
So real quick on Adams then, there is a path. Then people feel like the cap problem, but there is a path to fit him in. Then,
yeah, I mean, there's a path to fit in anybody. It's just how much are you willing to take on a salary, and then you have to cut bait with a lot of other people to make that happen. But I think with Adams, it's easier. Say if you signed, I guess you could do it with Clowney too this year because he's a free agent right now. Although he's going to want big time pass rusher money. But because this guy has 2 years of control left, unlike Ngakoue and unlike Clowney, you can use these 2 years right now to keep a low cap number by putting some of that guaranteed money in this year and next year, and still making it manageable base salary and salary and cap number for these 2 years, and then even more manageable beyond that. It's a lot of bookkeeping stuff. Not everybody understands that. I try to. It's kind of like what they did with Carson Wentz. They gave him a big signing bonus after 3 years, so that these last 2 years, his cap number has been big, but not exorbitant, not crazy big.
When discussing the Adams trade, Ertz and Goddard always come up into play because, hey, you got two great tight ends. So my question is, do you think that Ertz and Goddard will be here for the long run when it comes to this organization? Or do you think that whether it's for Adams or maybe another player down the road, they utilize the fact that they do have two great tight ends and they might actually move on from one of them at some point?
Yeah, that's a good question, Hunter. And I would look at it almost similarly from a contract standpoint for both of them. Zach Ertz wants to be, have a contract that's commensurate with the top tight ends. He deserves that. They need to wait for George Kittle to sign, who's also from that Adams class, by the way, to sign his extension to kind of figure out what the right number is for Ertz. Instead of trading one to pay the other, what they can do, Hunter, is say, you know what, we have Dallas Goddard still for 2 more years on his 4-year deal, right? Because he's only been in the league 2 years. So we've got him this year and we have him next year. So if we're going to want to have both guys, but we want to make this work, what we can do is when we extend Zach Ertz, we're going to give all his most of that money is going to be in the next 2 years, so that by the time the guaranteed money is up on Zach Ertz's new deal in 2 years, that'll be at the same time that they want to sign Goddard to a long-term contract. Okay, and then they can make a decision then. They can say, all right, well, we just had 2 more years of Ertz, but Goddard has really grown in these 4 years, and we're ready to move on. We've grown our wide receiver base, so we're ready to be more of a 3-receiver, 1 tight end team again. Or they can decide that their receivers just haven't lived up, and then you need both tight ends, and they can just kind of put more money in the tight end position than in the wide receiver position. But at least they have 2 years of Goddard under contract right now before they have to make that decision. And that, to me, would make sense if they want to give Ertz a contract extension, which they should, is to put most of that money into 2 years and then make a decision after those 2 years on who to move on from.
Yeah, absolutely. I like having both tight ends. I know a lot of people look at it as a luxury. You don't need 2 great tight ends, but you look around the league and you see that tight ends are definitely very powerful to offenses, and having 2 of them would be great. But I kind of want to transition into Carson Wentz because I know you had Greg Cosell on and he was breaking down some Eagles tape. And I just want to know, what's the most interesting comment you heard from Greg Cosell about Carson Wentz and what he sees in film?
Yeah, and I hate to be the negative. I just stuck in my head. He talked a lot about Carson Wentz missing the layups, and it was really interesting. I think that's something that we all thought last year when he was really going through his struggles in late October and early November, that there were some certain plays, and I think it all sticks out in our head, like trying to hit Miles Sanders on the sideline on a very routine throw to the flat where he would just sail it over his head and out of bounds. And then even a couple to the receivers just got sailed that you never saw Carson Wentz do in 2017. And I specifically asked Greg if he remembered this being an issue with Carson his last year at North Dakota State, or even his first 2 years in the NFL. And I believe what Greg said is, maybe every once in a while, but last year it was just so apparent that there were just too many layups missed for a quarterback of Carson Wentz's caliber. And he wasn't down on Carson. He still thinks Carson's a tremendous talent. But when we talk about the best of the position, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, those guys don't miss the easy ones. They just don't miss layups. And that was an issue for Carson Wentz at times last year.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Before we roll here, the news today on Dak Prescott signing the franchise tender. That will pay him $31.4 million. Both sides are going to look to iron things out long term, but are you surprised that just on a random Monday, Dak Prescott signs the franchise tender?
Not really surprised. I mean, he could have probably waited until the very last day, but it sounds like I think, again, with COVID just not making anybody do anything, you might as well sign now, guarantee yourself what you can before the league makes any kind of strange decision. So at least now you've guaranteed yourself that money, and they will probably continue to work toward a long-term deal, or Dak will continue to try to follow the same footsteps laid out by Kirk Cousins, which is to play on these one-year deals that pay you a boatload of money, and then when you are finally a free agent, you sign maybe like an all guaranteed deal. And I'm sure somebody would give it to him, just like they did the Vikings did for Kirk Cousins.
Crazy stuff. As you mentioned, you wonder how much the impact that COVID had on his decision. Did he just say, you know what, I don't know that I can even get any more money given the environment that we're in right now. I'll just accept that deal.
And I think that's a smart thing to do. I mean, who knows what's around door number 2 or what's behind door number 2. I mean, like tomorrow you could hear a bunch of players tested positive, the league panics and shuts down. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. So you might as well sign and get the money that you're going to be owed now before it's too late.
Did the Eagles make any statement, or are they, I'm assuming they're aware of this Dallas Goddard stuff?
All I've seen, I just know that they're aware of it. I don't think they've made any official statement on it.
All right, because that video, man, he really, he got cold clocked pretty good there. You hope that. Yeah,
I heard Hunter say that what you initially read and then what you see on video is a lot different. I agree with him. You think like maybe somebody just kind of like slapped him upside the head, sucker punch, and he wasn't allowed to see him hit the ground like that and be motionless was a shock to the senses.
All right, more on that. Go check out the video on our website, 973ESPN.com. Football at 4, powered by Inside the Birds. Geoff Mosher today. Andrew DeCecco is in tomorrow. Mosher's back on Wednesday, and then Adam Kaplan on Thursday here for Football at 4. All right, Mosher, take care, pal.
All right, have a great day, guys.
All right, Mosher, Monday, 4, Inside the Birds, Football at 4.